So as Carolyn said, we've heard two responses this morning to the news that either Jesus is on the way or that he is already here. First, song of praise from Mary, Jesus' mother in the middle of her pregnancy. She's had the angel visit her early on, letting her know that Jesus is on the way. But our reading comes later in the pregnancy, where Mary has been visiting with her relative Elizabeth, who's just confirmed prophetically to her that the child that she's carrying is indeed all of those things that she's hoped for. And so Mary overflows in this joy-filled song, moving from praise for how all of this stuff is affecting her personally through to the wonder of what God is doing in the world through the coming of her child. He shows his mercy to those who have respect for him, she says, from parent to child down through the years. He has done mighty things with his powerful arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their deepest thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up people who are not considered important. He has filled with good things those who are hungry, but he has sent away those who are rich. Mary looks out at her world from the position of someone of little means, of little power, from a rural community out in the middle of nowhere, from a people who have lived as oppressed under the rule of military superpowers for generations now. And she sings prophetically in celebration of what God is doing, that although her baby is still a few months away at this point, it is as if a great reversal of the state of her world is taking place. She sees that the proud, those who think highly of themselves, are scattered, that those who rule and use their power for selfish gain are being brought down, that those who are rich and who look only to their own needs are left empty and wanting. Meanwhile, those at the bottom, the discarded, the forgotten, are being lifted up, and those who are hungry are being filled. Mary sings because in the announcement of the arrival of Jesus comes the news that the world is being remade, that it's being turned upside down. And from where she's sitting at this point in the story, in her place and position in the world, that is a very good thing. Contrast that with our second reading in Matthew's Gospel, as from the lips of the wise men, the king of Judea, Herod, hears word of the birth of Jesus from the wise men, from the Magi. And when Herod hears, he is very upset, and all of Jerusalem with him. Herod is shook at this news. We know a little bit about Herod from ancient Roman historians, raised as a Jew from a prominent family. He was a powerful man. He was gifted the title of King of Judea by the Roman Senate, and he wasn't a good person. He killed many members of his own family, including a wife and two of his children, in an effort to hold on to power. And the New Testament account, which follows on from this, is that in fear of this announcement of another king, Herod orders the killing of all of the male children under the age of 2 in the Bethlehem region. For Herod, this news is not a joy or a hope, rather it comes to him as a threat. It comes as a threat to his way of life, to all that he takes for granted. And from where he's sitting at this point in time, in his place and position in the world, the news of Jesus' arrival is not a good thing at all. And I guess the thought that's kind of just sitting with me this morning, very briefly, is that in the busyness of the season, it is easy for us to bypass all of this and to reduce Christmas and this morning to a simple kind of nativity scene somewhere out there in the background. A sleeping baby surrounded by doting parents and animals and shepherds and all the rest. And we can kind of leave the implications of Christmas at arm's length while we get on, with what we were doing this morning, opening some more presents, what many of us will be doing later on, eating some food, catching up with that cousin that we see just once a year. But the encouragement and the challenge of today will, if we let it, it will draw us into something deeper, because in Mary's response to the news of Jesus coming, there is nothing less than a heartfelt and joyous anticipation of a revolution of the kingdom of God. Here's the German pastor and martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He says the Song of Mary is the oldest Advent hymn. It is also the most passionate, the wildest, and one might say the most revolutionary Advent hymn that has ever been sung. This is not the gentle, tender, dreamy Mary as we often see her portrayed in paintings. The Mary who is speaking here is passionate, carried away, proud, enthusiastic. There is none of that sweet or wistful or even playful tone of many of our Christmas carols, but instead a hard and strong, relentless hymn about the toppling of the thrones and the humiliation of the lords of this world, about the power of God and the powerlessness of humankind. On Christmas morning, as we look out at our world again, so filled with its imbalances and injustices and inequalities, we hear again a hope today, a real and concrete hope that this arrival will make its impact felt in those areas in our world that need it the most. In fact, less a hope in Mary's words and more a certainty that God is at work, that God is effecting something new, that our world is being realigned. Christmas is calling us into a different way of seeing things, even against our experience and the horror of what we see sometimes out there, and we have seen that again in recent weeks. This is not the way that things will be, Christmas is telling us. Something else is going on. But it's not just a hope to observe. It's one that also requires a bit of a shift in us. Herod, and apologies that the reading is mislabeled there, Herod can become a little bit of a pantomime sort of villain in the nativity scene. And it's easy for Herod to become that because clearly he was an awful person. He's the epitome of everything that Mary's song sings against. But for us to allow that to distance us from him without some deeper consideration, that'd be the wrong way to go about things as well. Because when we come to Herod, well, at least in his response, he's honest, you know. He sees in the arrival of this baby a genuine threat to his way of life, to the privileges and the powers that he has enjoyed. He recognizes that if another king is on the way, then that means that he is going to need to change, and he is not interested in any of that. And so he does what is within his power to try and avoid it. And the uncomfortable thought that then sits there with us is that the prospect of a changed world in the arrival of Jesus likewise necessitates a change for us as well. To use the language from the reading, the news of Jesus' arrival perhaps should cause us some upset. It should rock our boats just a little bit. Perhaps it ruins some of our plans. We might not feel that powerful or privileged this morning next to the Herods or the Trumps or the Taylor Swifts of our world, but it's important perhaps to recognize that simply by virtue of being in this room this morning, in this part of the world at this time of year, that fact alone puts us amongst the most powerful and privileged people who walk the earth today. And there is a challenge to us for whom much of today will probably be a reflection of that fact, to see that the calling for a realignment in our world comes to all people, but perhaps especially to us, against our cravings, against our comforts, against our security, for what we want, for the life that is sold to us through the Christmas season. Christmas calls us to turn away from ourselves again, to see a world made new in the light of Jesus' arrival, and it asks us an uncomfortable question of whether or not we are on board with that as well. Reflecting on Mary's song, the American poet and essayist Kathleen Norris writes this: Mary's song reminds us that what we most value, all that gives us status, power, pride, strength, and wealth, can be a barrier to receiving what God has in store for us. If we have it all or think that we can buy it all, there will be no Christmas for us. If we are full of ourselves, there will be no room for God to enter into our hearts. Mary's prayer of praise, like many of the Psalms, calls us to consider our true condition. God is God, and we are the creatures that God has formed from the earth. The nations are but nations, and even the power of a mighty army cannot save us. We all return to dust. And if we hope to rise in God's new creation where love and justice will reign triumphant, our responsibility here and now is to reject the temptation to employ power and force and oppression against those weaker than ourselves. We honor the incarnation best by honoring God's image in all people and seeking to make this world into a place of welcome for the Prince of Peace. And sure, we are no Herod, hopefully, but we can put a stop to this in other ways, because we are great at taking the Christmas thing and watering it down. We're great at pretending that parts of this announcement don't actually apply to us. We're great at keeping the whole Jesus thing at a distance and just keeping it as, like a little religious sprinkle on the side of whatever else we have going on. But the challenge of today is that we will not let this happen, because Christmas means that things are changing in our world. Past the twinkly lights and the candles and plastic Christmas trees and all the rest, there's a kingdom of God revolution taking place, and it's one that comes also to us. It's a revolution of our own hearts and our own minds. It's news that if we let it, will take us where we are and perhaps upset us a little bit, rock our boats, disrupt our plans, reshape us, perhaps make us new, in order that the fullness of the season, the hope and peace and joy and love would be born again in us. As Kathleen Norris says, a pathway of welcome as the news of Jesus' arrival reaches us again this morning.